When the awakening happens, when we wake up out of the narrative self into this undivided presence that is deeply impersonal, but very intimate and closer than close, and so spacious and so free and innocent. It's such a relief. Then when the mind releases that contracted state from mind identification and relaxes into a kind of pure reflection, like pure mirroring. So this is the nature of unbound consciousness. This is the nature of boundless presence and sensation that is now seen to be intrinsically aware, right? So our sense experience, our experience of the world is actually an emanation of our true nature. So there is not a world in the way that we thought there was, and there's not a body in the way that we thought there was. There is just this immediate, boundless, oceanic field of well-being and simple presence and power. Power in a sense that it's very embodied, this insight. When it is realized with your whole being, when it kind of penetrates your mind, heart, and gut. So that's what happens at the moment of genuine awakening, that there is this type of complete penetration and release into this transparency and radiant vastness. So this is, of course, very beautiful when it happens. It's a beautiful phase of our awakening journey. But it is good to be aware that it is a phase. So I will go through some interesting pitfalls that can occur after the awakening has happened. So when we are in this state of a boundless presence, consciousness, there's usually quite a bit of bliss that is released when the shift takes place. And this bliss can be felt somatically, like as subtle, deep, pulsating well-being inherent to existence itself. So it's very different type of well-being than what we are used to hunt when we were mind identified and we were going for pleasurable experiences and highs that were always followed by lows. So this bliss that is inherent to reality itself, this well-being, this natural happiness, which is not happiness in a human sense, it can be quite overwhelming, even initially, like the search of that well-being through our system. And it often comes with a sense of fundamental unity. Like you really feel that everything is one, that there is just one consciousness experiencing itself. So when you see others, you still see others in this face, by the way. But when you look into their eyes, you can see it's the same consciousness looking back. So you could say that it's an experience of self that sees itself in everything and as everything, that is everything, fundamentally speaking. But there is still that subtle experience of duality. Like if you look into the eyes of another, you can still sense that there is something substantial there looking back at you. But now it feels like it's nothing other than what you fundamentally are. So it's this oneness kind of interacting with itself. And it can be so overwhelming initially in comparison to this previous state of separation and mind identification when we felt so different and apart from the world and from other people that felt so other, in comparison to us. So now this newly released awakening, bliss, and this boundlessness of non-separation, it is quite impactful. And it may appear like this is the truth. This is like what reality is, that it is essentially just one consciousness or oneness, unity. So this is something that is often only seen in retrospect when you move further in the awakening process. And this particular phase drops off because it is a phase, then you kind of see it for what it was, that it was a kind of overlay, actually. This fundamental oneness. And experientially, it feels so real because the experience of separation is largely dissolved here when the mind identification collapses. So that's why there is this sense of realness to it in comparison, to living in the world of mental reflections. But it is a good question to ask, like, just because it feels real, does it mean that it is? So when you are in this state, often the experience of separate self, the narrative self, is initially totally wiped out or largely wiped out. So it can be hard to remember that it even really was there. And it can be hard to really understand that other people are not necessarily living this unity, this oneness. So this may sound strange, but when you wake up to this, it feels like the whole reality wakes up. So when you look at others, it appears that they are this one consciousness that is inherently awake and realized, just interacting with itself. But this kind of projection of oneness to others, because again, it is the kind of projection here that happens, it can cause some issues in relationships, in close relationships. Like if we actually kind of project that the others experience reality the way we do, So it is a kind of overlay, this oneness, which is later on seen to be a kind of filter. Like we are not actually fully sober here. We are quite intoxicated by this state of union. So a lot of shadow projections can happen in this phase because our own shadow is now kind of infused by this experience of bliss and universal love and compassion. So our shadow is still very much there. I mean, in a sense that it's not necessarily examined at all, it's not necessarily assimilated and digested, it's not necessarily yet seen in the light of clear light. So a lot of unconscious projections may happen in this state, but they may appear very divine. Like you may project this love and oneness and unity to your close relationships, but they are not necessarily living it at all in the same way like you are. And you may not be able to really relate to their experience at all because to you it's filtered by this experience of fundamental oneness. So you don't actually really fully soberly respond to what they communicate to you when you are in this state because you are so immersed in your own experience, which appears very universal here. But it is still a form of self. And the experience of self can never really connect with another. That's the interesting thing. Like the self always sees others through projections. And what can happen when people tap into this unity, that can also happen as a glimpse, by the way, as an experience, and then it can close. Or it can open through awakening shift as a mode of being. So what happens when people tap into this is that there is very much a sense of wanting to be seen still. Like you want your true self to be seen and mirrored by others. You have this sense of being divine. And there are still these kind of really deeply rooted, we could say, archetypical self-image is operating here. Like often people have this sense of fundamental goodness, that I'm fundamentally good. That can be something to look into. It's often hard to look into in this phase, but if you continue with the awakening journey, you will be able to see these subtle forms of self-images that actually are quite much amplified in this phase of unity consciousness. There can also appear this desire to help others. And that can appear so genuine and innocent, like, oh, I just want to share this with everyone, this freedom and this beauty. But it is oftentimes a form of self that is activated there, like I want to help others, right? So this type of compassion. And what it tends to create is subtle, energetic, emotional bonds between people, especially if someone becomes a teacher in this phase. Or if you connect with a teacher who is mainly stabilized in these forms of awakening, where there is still a sense of self. So there are these type of kind of spiritual personalities that are playing out here oftentimes. And these type of relationships where you kind of mirror for each other your own divinity and kind of magic and beauty. So there is often resistance to seeing the shadow material here. There's so much emphasis on light. And there can be a sense that the shadow is not even there when the narrative self kind of collapses and the kind of angst and suffering apparently dissolves with it. So the shadow is still largely invisible here, but it is there. Like shame, unworthiness, anger, grief. Like a lot of unprocessed shadow material is definitely still intact here. And it will be faced if you continue with the journey, which often happens when this type of honeymoon of awakening begins to settle, and now you are really prepared because you are charged by this well-being, by this bliss, by this unconditional joy. It charges you, it gives you resources that now you have capacity to really descend into the shadow. But that's often a point where people start to struggle because they feel that something is going wrong now. They feel that, oh, why is the bliss apparently disappearing? And why am I facing these really uncomfortable emotions? And they start to resist this natural movement of awakening because there is this imagination or belief that that's what the awakening was. It was that state of unity consciousness. But that was actually just a phase. It wasn't a destination. And it's a necessary phase because our system requires a kind of frequential attunement when we go through these different phases of awakening. Like we can't jump directly from mind identification to the realization of emptiness most of the time. Like, yeah, in the case of Ramana Maharishi, yeah, it happened like that, but that's quite rare. Most of the time, there is a kind of a process there, and it allows this type of gradual increase of our capacity to adjust to the power of direct realization. And these aspects of unity and oneness, it does something to our system. It allows a kind of like a relaxation and nurturing. So it often allows a healing of childhood traumas or pre-verbal traumas when that type of material is emerging within this field of all-encompassing love and fundamental non-otherness. So it really provides that type of like vibrational matrix within which this type of shadow integration can occur. And it prepares us for the next phase in this journey, which is not what you could ever expect. So if you're going to continue with the awakening journey and move towards non-dual realization and the realization of no self, it's kind of like beyond any of our intuitive understandings or projections or imaginations, like what happens next here. And I've made other videos about it. I'm not going to go into that too much in this video, but it can initially feel very surprising and rather devastating, that it almost feels like this unity and fundamental oneness that appeared like the pinnacle of our spiritual path, that appeared like awakening, that actually needs to be released. That actually seems to disappear into this enigmatic absence and unknowability of the transition to no self, transition beyond all identity, beyond the experience of self altogether.